Joey, my man.
How are you?
What's up, man? Good to see you. It's been a while.
I know. Good to see you.
What's new? How's life? How's dad life? Work life?
Dude, dad life is about to be dad life times two in about 10 days. We have our second baby about to
Holy.
be here.
That's
Yeah.
wild stuff. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm trying to get as much done this week as I can.
Yeah. That's smart. That's smart. I think about that a
Yeah.
lot. I think about I don't know if you have dogs, but I had one dog. I know it's dogs and kids. Some people get really annoyed when you try and make the comparison, but I think that there's like still something to understand there. When I had one dog, I was like, wow, this is a lot of work. There's just absolutely no way I would ever have a second dog. I mean, it was just like, I was so hard. I was like, there's no way I would ever do this again. We're big on training the dogs. I'm like, I'm not going through that whole work again. Guess what? I have two dogs now, and I can't imagine my life without having two dogs. Like the person that previously was so sure that having two dogs would be so exponentially crazier, now can't imagine not having two dogs. And I'm trying to tell myself that it's going to be similar with kids, where I'm like, wow, I can't imagine that. Well, we want a second kid, but I'm certainly also in that camp of like, wow, I can't imagine how crazy it will be with two. Obviously, you're not there right now, but have you had similar thoughts?
Dude, 100%. I will say though, I'm more excited for the second one than I was the first one. The first time I was just really nervous. Like the fear of the unknown, right? But just seeing how fun it is and how cool it is to have a baby. And our baby's two now. I think definitely a little bit older than yours, right?
Yeah,
You're just still under one?
yeah. She's 7 months.
Yeah. It's yeah, it's just been a lot of fun. So I'm excited for the second one. I'm nervous for the sleepless nights again. But besides that, I'm definitely looking forward to it. I have a ton of friends who have two kids, and the feedback has been pretty mixed. Some kids are like, one to two is so simple, like zero to one is so hard. And then I have other friends who say the exact opposite. That's one to two is going from like one to 10. It's not twice the work,
Right,
it's exponentially more.
right,
So
right.
we'll see, man. Everybody obviously has a different perspective on it.
Sure. I mean, it doesn't. It's not static, So that might be, hey, in the initial phase, it feels exponential, and on the back end, it
Sure.
feels exponentially easier. And I again, not to do the dog thing, but I feel that too when we got our second dog and he was a puppy. And I know you know this. You guys had some trouble back in the day.
Yeah.
When he was a puppy, it was exponentially harder, and I was like, oh my god, what did we do? And then they're both older now, and settled into a life dynamic that actually makes it easier. So it could be that way too. I'm sure there's a million parents listening to this shouting again across the spectrum of outcomes of, oh, it's great, it's easier, and oh, it's exponentially harder, and everything in between.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm excited for you, man. You have a boy or a girl?
I'll let you know in a couple of days, dude. We're having a girl. So we have a boy, we're having a girl now. We're pretty excited for that.
Yeah, man. I mean, I can only speak to having a girl, but I'm biased. I
Yeah.
freaking love having a daughter. It's the best thing ever. Yeah. Yeah.
No, I'm excited. My father-in-law, so my wife's one of four girls, and her parents live down the street from us, so we're super close. I'm super close with her parents, and her dad sees how like because like really physically loving, like I love holding the baby, playing around um a ton, right? So he sees me smothering the baby all the time, and he's like, just wait till you have a daughter. And I'm like, I can't imagine replacing my little boy, but we'll
Sure.
see. Obviously, replacing is the wrong word, but
Right.
giving the baby girl more attention. But he's
Yeah.
like, wait till you have a little girl. It's completely different. So we'll see. I'll let you know in about 10 days, man. I'll let
Yeah,
you know in
man.
10 days how it
I'll
is.
I'll definitely need to check in. It's funny. I've been thinking about doing like a little dad's roundtable, just like getting a
Hmm.
podcast with a couple dudes. I know Danny Matranga just had a baby. You're on your second
Hmm.
baby. Even my friend Brian Borstein, whose kids are a little bit older. It's just been. I just think that.
Hmm.
I mean, even just selfishly, getting some dads on to talk about life and just how that goes is something that I feel like, whatever. I mean, just something that I think would be nice, and maybe from just from a dad's perspective, we don't do enough potentially. Is get together and talk about the
100%.
the good things, the challenging things, and all that. So maybe we'll circle back to that.
Yeah. Every time I rarely ever hang out with friends. It's maybe once a month nowadays, where like I take some time to hang out with a buddy without the baby, without my wife or anything like that. And anytime I do, I have a couple of buddies who are dads here. Every time I do it, I'm like, damn, I need to do this more often. It's just tough, man, right?
Yeah, no, it's definitely tough.
Talking about the dad thing, like you follow Bernardo, right? Coach Bernardo.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, he's my business partner with the whole Fit for Life Academy thing, and he's a young dad as well. His son is two, and they're having another baby about 2 months after us, and we were talking about it, and we're like, man, it would be fun to do coaching like specifically for dads because it's so relatable. It's almost like a brotherhood type of thing. Obviously, we're not going to do it because we've built our business the way we have.
Sure.
But if I were starting over, I would definitely do that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that there's merit there for sure. How's the how's your espresso game?
Dude, you'd be disappointed. I have not made
No.
espresso in like 2 or 3 months because I've just been
Oh
buying a
shit.
Costco canned cold brew.
Okay, fair, fair,
I've been
fair,
downing
fair, fair.
those.
Yeah, the silver ones. Yeah, yeah, yeah. There you go. Yeah,
Yep.
the Kirkland ones. Nice. Yeah,
It's just so easy,
so
man.
easy.
And I've been trying to just like wake up and get straight to work on the computer, and
Yep.
so I haven't been making much espresso.
No,
How
I
about
get that.
yourself?
No, it's funny that espresso. It's funny is something very out of character for me, and I'm going to throw it back over to you in a second. But making espresso is something out of character because I'm very much a workflow person. I know that that sounds like a weird thing, but like very efficient, very like, hey, this doesn't make sense from a workflow perspective. This takes too much time. The return on
Yeah,
my time here is low. I don't do a lot of things that are like for the love of I don't want to make it sound like I'm some sort of robot, but like
I'm the same way, dude.
making espresso the way
Yeah,
I'm making it is inefficient, time inefficient,
100%.
is all about the enjoyment of the experience. It's like,
Yeah,
I can get coffee that's probably like within 10% as good in 1/100th of the time, but I'm choosing to spend 3, 4, 5, 6 minutes making coffee. It's just so out of character for me to do something solely for the enjoyment of the experience, the ritual, as it were. My dad would call it. Do
yeah.
you have? I know that we share that to some degree, and obviously you've sold out a little bit to Big Kirkland, but you have other things in your life like that where you're like, yeah, I maybe I take a little longer here, or maybe like when it comes to cooking, I'm not like that at all either. I'd rather spend less time on it and have it be pretty good than spend a lot of time on it and be really good. Do you have anything in your life that you're like, yeah, this is something I really enjoy, even if it doesn't make a whole lot of sense efficiency wise?
Cooking.
Yeah.
Um, I actually before I got into the whole health and fitness thing, I was into health and fitness, but before I got into it professionally, I wanted to go to culinary school. Probably like midway through high school, I really wanted to go to culinary school, and I wouldn't say I'm wasting time cooking every single day, but on the weekends, I like to take my time. Like if I'm gonna make some steak, right? I love steak. My followers know I'm always posting pictures of steak. Um, I will salt it the day
Yeah.
before,
A little dry
put it in
brine.
the fridge on a rack for 24 hours,
Yeah.
let it get a little bit dry, uh, preheat the grill for 15, 20 minutes, let the steak cool down.
Yeah.
After I cook it, nobody can touch it for a good 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So I definitely like taking my time when I cook, but it's for special occasion on the weekends, really
Sure.
like throughout the week. I mean, yesterday I'm sure people hate eating in this fashion, but I literally baked like probably 6 pounds of white fish, cooked up like, I don't know, 8 servings of rice. I'll probably have that for lunch for the next 5 days, and then pretty monotonous with it throughout the week. And then I take my time on the weekends. Let me ask you a question. Are you a fan of Alex Hormozy?
Oof, that's a heavy one. Knee jerk, I would have said no.
Okay,
He just was like, I didn't pick up on him when I was at, I believe, an age where I would have been more inclined to pick up on it, and so almost like
sure,
on the back end of my Hormozy, like I look at it differently now than I might have had I caught on to his
sure.
sort of style of content maybe 5, 10 years ago.
Yeah. Well, I brought that up because of what you mentioned that you are very like an efficient person. I would say, from my perspective, he's a bit extreme on some things, but I like some of the things he shares from a philosophical perspective. And one of the things that I picked up from him was he was like, man, people have all of these morning rituals to be more productive. And sometimes you spend an hour and a half or 2 hours on your morning ritual so you can be more productive. You can just wake up and get to work. And I was like, that is very true. And as of recent, like I literally wake up, go to the bathroom, grab my cold brew, sit on my computer. So I'm on the computer by 6:30 in the morning. And it's just nice to get that extra hour or so of work in the morning. It's why I haven't been making the espresso or doing any of
Yeah.
the other stuff, honestly.
I have realized that I love being dad so much that the minute my
Mhm.
daughter wakes up, there is a difference in my level of focus on work. And so I've been like, cool, like I guess I just get up earlier and earlier. And so like
Yeah.
I'm normally a rip the band-aid off person. I'm like, screw it. I want to get up earlier. I'm just gonna get up earlier. But um just playing around with it mentally, where I set my alarm 1 minute earlier every day. And it's so obvious. It's like I laugh because I'm like, dude, you could just in 2 or 3 days just transition yourself circadian rhythm wise to
Yeah.
like a new. But I'm like
Yeah.
5:09, 5:08,
Yeah.
5:07. We're at like 5:06 right now. The goal is maybe 4:45, and I'm not flexing getting up earlier as some sort of flex as a
Yeah.
flex, but I'm just saying that that's again. I get up, I walk the dogs, have a coffee, and I can if I can get 2 hours of work uninterrupted, no baby, nothing. I feel like I'm way more productive for the day, for sure. Do you know?
Yeah,
Do you know
that's a good
who?
point too, because my son literally walks in the room like 3 or 4 times in the morning. I'm like, dude, this is very cute, but it's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
hard.
Do you know
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
Ramit is? He's like a financial guy on social media. Ramit Sethi. He's like an author.
I believe so. Yeah.
He's while we're on this topic of efficiency, he's got a lot of financial philosophies. One of them is like extreme saving on stuff you don't care about, and extreme spending on the stuff that really makes you happy. And I think this falls very
Mhm.
similarly. Where like I'm again, I know you and I both have an care about our coffee and stuff like that, and have had good chats about spending too long making espresso and all that. But if you're someone who doesn't care about that, then I would absolutely be like, hey, cold brew in the fridge, chug it down. I might even be like, hey,
Yeah.
take a caffeine pill, like.
Yeah.
And then like you said, there's like, okay, there's a couple of things I really care about. I'm gonna take it slow. I'm gonna dry brine my steak. I'm gonna heat up the grill. I'm gonna enjoy that experience. And then all these other things I don't care about as much, we're putting those as much on autopilot. We're saving whatever that means
Yeah.
contextually for that thing. And I've always really aligned with that, where like, okay, I'm willing to save money in a lot of ways, but like, okay, if I'm buying a piece of home gym equipment, I'm like, this is my life. It's my life's work. I'll
Yeah.
maybe that's where I splurge, and ruthlessly saving elsewhere. And I feel very similarly with my time, for sure.
Agreed. And this kind of parallels, because I know we want to talk about health and fitness at some point.
Yeah, it definitely parallels.
This kind of parallels, you know, to give a little bit of background or a little bit more context, we're essentially talking about how to maximally enjoy your time and the things that you do, right? Like, hey, maybe don't spend time and money on things you don't enjoy and spend time and money on things you do enjoy. And you can get perhaps more value and enjoyment of life overall, right? And I think this parallels the whole health and fitness thing so well too. Um, it's similar and different in some ways where people hyper focus just on the outcome of wanting to be in a particular shape, wanting to lose a certain amount of weight. And I totally get why people have that perspective. But I really, and I know it's easier said than done, especially when people like you and I, we've been doing this for so long, right? But encourage people to fall in love with and enjoy the process itself, right? Because if you can adopt the lifestyle in a way that you actually enjoy, you've already won. The only thing the only thing getting in the way of where you are now and your goal is just time, right? Because you're already doing the things continuously or consistently, I should say. And that's the first thought that came to my mind when you mentioned that of like spending time and money and on things that you enjoy, not doing that with things that you don't enjoy. I think that parallels the health and fitness thing so well.
How much do you think doing things you don't enjoy right now, almost in the hopes that you will find it easier slash the friction to do X habit will reduce over time with repetition and consistency? So how, like you just mentioned, hey, finding a way to love or enjoy the process enough to do it, we'll say, where you want to get to. That it's not necessarily
Yeah.
like a destination. It's adopting a mentality of enjoying the lifestyle that will ultimately lead to a happy and healthy life for the long term. But how much of you, just people sitting here like, I don't like vegetables, or I don't like planning my meals at all. I don't like not
Yeah.
drinking alcohol. I don't like exercising or lifting. How much of it is do it anyway, even though you don't like it right now, while trying to find the best, the thing you hate the least to get you to do it?
Yeah.
How much of working through not enjoying this does the average person have to deal with?
Yeah. Um, it's a balance, right? Because there does need to be a certain degree of commitment. And I think the degree of commitment also comes down to how important your goals actually are to you, right? Because I would say in many ways, perhaps some people that struggle with consistency with working out or whatever may be probably don't have much clarity around their goals or why those goals are important to them in the first place, right? Like for me, I work out regularly, yes, because I enjoy it, but I enjoy it because my health is an absolute priority to me. Like I wouldn't sacrifice making a little bit more money to be a little bit less healthy, right? Like to me, that's not worth it. To a lot of people, that is worth it, right? That's why so many people are so career driven and they let their health fall through the cracks. And so I'm saying this because when I say enjoy the little things or enjoy the process, there are going to be things that you don't enjoy, right? Um, Maybe even not even talking about in the context of health and fitness for myself, but we were just talking about waking up early and getting to work. Would I rather wake up at 6 and get to work or sleep in an extra hour and play with my son first thing in the morning? Like, yeah, the latter is more enjoyable in that particular instance, right? But I try to reframe the way I think about these things in terms of like the greater context of what I'm trying to achieve, right? I know that when I wake up early and I get to work, it's uncomfortable in that particular moment, but I feel so much more accomplished at the end of the day. I see how it directly impacts the progress that I can make in my business. I feel good about that. I would say it overall adds to um, my quality of life and overall happiness with my life as well. Right. And I bring this up because when it comes to the things that you don't enjoy, I think you have to reframe the way you're thinking about that particular thing. For example, vegetables. I eat vegetables with most of my meals. Is it naturally my most favorite thing? No, although I do like veggies, but I used to hate veggies. I do think through repetition, you enjoy things. I also think a lot of people benefit from external accountability. I think that's why I'm such a big proponent of coaching, right? Because some people really benefit from having that external accountability and slowly over time making things habitual. But regardless, like if you asked me, would I want to eat some plain protein and some veggies or a pizza? I'm always going to say the pizza tastes better, right? But I enjoy not doing that and focusing on the healthy choices because in the greater context of my overall goals, it contributes to the progress that I'm trying to make, right? So I think for a lot of people, Jordan, it's reframing the way they think about the behavior they don't enjoy. I know that's easier said than done, but I've at least personally and anecdotally working with clients, I think having these conversations of, hey, I know you don't want to do this in the moment. It doesn't seem like the most fun or the most enjoyable right now. But if you take a step back and think about how this behavior contributes to what you're trying to accomplish, it makes it easier to do the behavior, right? And if you take that a step further, and if you think about how not doing the thing actually, sure, provides uh, some short-term pleasure, it actually is contributing to a lot of the long-term stress and unhappiness that you're experiencing, right? I actually talking about Hormozy again, but he was talking about this from a business perspective. And it's like the things that you are avoiding right now and replacing with short-term pleasure is what's causing long-term discomfort. And that really hits home for me because yeah, if I ever get lazy and don't wake up early a couple days in a row, or I'm slacking off with work, or I'm not executing on my to-do list because I took some time off work to do whatever I wanted to do. Like in the short term, it feels good, but it almost always adds stress to my life and makes me a little bit less happy. Uh, so I think that's something that's really helpful for people. I know I've gone in a million different directions here, but reframing the way they're thinking about what they don't want to do in terms of how does that behavior actually benefit you? And if your goals are important to you and they are a priority, I think that makes it substantially easier to be consistent with the behavior. And the key word there is consistent, right? Because it's not going to be perfect all the time.
Yeah, I think that there's obviously a lot there, but one of the things is how do I get to the point where you mentioned, hey, being connected to kind of the reason that you're doing something. And I would say, I'm going to hazard a guess that you and I both, we think about that stuff. But I'm working out today and I haven't thought about, well, I want to work out because I want to be able to pick up my daughter and squat down and play with her
Yeah.
and my grandkids. Not thinking about that cognitively or consciously right now. And I'm hysterically going to use another coffee example, but, and the word might be, I might mess up the word here, but here's a quick theory about alcohol and caffeine. We'll say is that people don't actually enjoy Like how do people enjoy the
Sure.
taste of coffee and alcohol, right? When like objectively your first taste of either of them was probably that they were disgusting. Especially me. I mean, I'm drinking an espresso with no sugar. Even my dad, who's like the espresso king, will put some sugar in there because he thinks it's super bitter. What's actually happening is both caffeine and alcohol are having an effect on your brain, and they're having an effect on
Mhm.
your mood and behavior. And what happens, I think the word is it's an associative, where you are building an association between this thing, coffee, alcohol, and something it's giving you, whether it's an energy boost or a little buzz, and maybe even the things that you're doing when you're having coffee and alcohol. And I'll circling back to exercises. How do we get to the point where like my point is nobody likes the taste of alcohol or coffee the first time. So how do we actually develop the enjoyment? Like I love the taste of my espresso now. How did that happen? On some level, it's because I've consciously fallen in love with what the coffee gives me. And so, in a similar way, like you might not love exercise right now, lifting weights, cardiovascular exercise. How do we fall in love with what it gives us? You know, like my point is, how much should somebody be trying to, on purpose, remind themselves, I want to play with my daughter. I don't want to have chronic disease. I want to be there for my grandkids. You know, and I will say that this happened immediately. Like when I first had my daughter, I think I was just like holding her and I wanted to show her like flowers that were on the ground. And so I had her in front of me and I squatted down and I went down onto my knees and I sat on the floor and I was holding her. We were looking at these flowers. And then I thought to myself, imagine if I couldn't get up right now. I was like, imagine if I couldn't stand
Yeah.
up without using my hands, you know? And so I think it's important to have those moments to really think about them. And I think, and you can correct me and spit it up and chew it back out, or chew it up, spit it back out. I think it's important early on when you're developing these habits to try and actively remind yourself of the stuff that's really important to you. And that might be kooky things like writing it on a post-it in your gym, or having reminders of what's important to you. Because for now, there's a spectrum of like, I have to consciously think about this on one end of the spectrum, to I subconsciously now associate exercise with that stuff without needing to think about it so much. But
Sure.
that takes time. And I think if you're new to it and you don't love it and you're not able to really deeply subconsciously connect with what this exercise is giving you, I think you should actively be reminding yourself as often as possible in air quote kooky ways, like leaving a notepad or a picture of something, or something that brings you
Yeah.
back to something long term that feels less tangible, and then allows you to work back to the exercise that you're, or the action you're supposed to do that day to help you get that thing. Do you agree that it's like, hey, in the beginning you don't love this, maybe we need to be more cognizant, more intentional about connecting with your why? And I say that kind of, it's a
Yeah.
little woo woo, but I actually think that that's, it's funny, I used to think that was really woo woo and I hated that phrase, remember your why. But in the beginning, it, there's got to be a reason that you're doing this thing you don't like, and it has to be the
Yeah.
answer to why are you doing this.
Yeah. 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 And it's not even just at the beginning. I would say it's something that's continuous, right? Because even Jordan, people like yourself and myself, I go to the gym because I go to the gym, right? Like there's not much of a thought about it. Like I just go to the gym. There are times where I don't feel motivated. There are times where I don't want to go to the gym. There are times where I'm tired. And I think in those times it is helpful to remind yourself of your why, independent of how long you've been doing it. So it's not just for people in the beginning. And this whole aspect of remembering your why, I think it just comes down to creating as much positive reinforcement with the thing that you're trying to do as possible, right? Because if you can create positive associations, you're going to do the thing more. At the end of the day, human nature is to move towards comfort and away from discomfort. So if you can artificially create comfort by reminding yourself of your why, or celebrating a small win, however small it may be, or doing exercise in the way that's actually a little bit more fun, right? Because you and I love hypertrophy training. Everybody isn't trying to be as jacked as possible. And when we talk about muscle from a health perspective, like that doesn't mean you have to be a bodybuilder, right? It just means you have to do some strength training. You could do things in a million different ways for fun. So creating that positive reinforcement, I think, is incredibly important. And you mentioned earlier, like you've been thinking about situations with your daughter. While you were speaking, I was thinking like, I think I'm a little bit different than a lot of people in the sense that I tend not to think about things too much from day to day and be very much on autopilot. I used to be a very not disciplined person. And when I say very not disciplined, I mean very not disciplined person, to the point where like I used to do horribly in school because I would do my homework and then like stuff it in my book bag and not find it. Right. And like in college, I failed classes simply because I wasn't interested in like little things like that, where I've been able to develop this muscle of discipline. And I really do think discipline, quote unquote, because there's so many soft skills that go behind being disciplined at a particular thing, but it itself is a skill, right? And I think if you are disciplined in different areas of your life, it's easier to develop discipline in other areas. And I do think that one of the reasons why I've been able to develop discipline is because of my love for health and fitness, specifically with lifting. Uh, it's hard, it's uncomfortable, delayed gratification. I think all of those skills have allowed me to be disciplined in other areas. But I do think about, my why, not intentionally, but unintentionally all the time. Like yesterday, I was just at the playground with my son, and my son's two, so he can't really like run around too well on the playground and stuff like that. So if he goes up the playground and tries to go down the swing, I follow him, right? Whereas all the other parents are chilling back and like their kids are a little bit older, maybe 4 or 5, they could play around on their own. And I'm, like going on the monkey bars, jumping over stuff, going down the swing, climbing up the swing really quick. And I'm like, man, a lot of these other parents can't do this. And I don't want to be the parent who can't like jump up and get my son if he's in trouble or whatever, right? And so little thoughts like that do pop into my mind all the time and reinforces why I'm doing what I'm doing. Uh, we take our son to soccer classes on Saturday mornings, and this is not to be judgmental at all, but like 90% of the parents there are not healthy or in shape at all. And it's like, man, you're bringing your kid to do some sports, but you yourself aren't trying to lead by example. So little things like that do pop into my mind all the time. I wouldn't say it's something that I think about consciously very frequently, but if you are somebody who struggles with the consistency, I do think that, whether you put a note on your desk or I've never been one to like journal daily or like do what's it called, gratitude journaling or whatever it's called. But I know it's super beneficial for some people, and I have clients that do it regularly, and it has been very impactful.
The something I this is my bias that I can't shake actually is that exercise, you don't, even if you don't love it. I think something I would remind people who don't love it, two things is: one, lower the bar of what exercise needs to be. Find something that you hate the
Yeah,
least, that you have the highest percent chance of enjoying. Absolutely. Um, totally. The second thing is you don't actually need to do that much to be healthy. And I don't mean that like everyone's got different responsibilities, different work, different family situations. So when I say, you know, two lifting sessions a week and 2 cardio sessions a week, somebody might be like, dude, 4 workouts a week is a lot. But I think that it can feel a whole lot more overwhelming without that knowledge. I think if you ask the average person how much lifting they need to do to be healthy, they wouldn't say 1 hour per week. I mean, 1 hour of resistance training per week probably gets you north of 90% of the health benefits of lifting weights. And for cardio, we have our physical activity guidelines of, 75 to 150 minutes, which, yeah, if you're just doing low intensity cardio, 150 minutes might sound like, what it is, which is 2.5 hours. But I would actually think that the more efficient way to do it is to go for the 75 minutes on the more vigorous side,
sure.
which, by the way, doesn't mean you're sprinting for 75 minutes and so I just, again, my the last 5 years of my life I've been obsessed with how little can I do and get a big ROI. And so I just for people out there who don't love it, like 1 hour of resistance training per week is enough for you to get the vast majority of the health benefits. No, you're not a pro bodybuilder. No, you're not mega jacked. Totally. But we're not talking about that right now. We're talking about stuff that's going to improve quality of life. I would even say that plus 1 cardio session per week, plus an emphasis on trying to move more throughout the day. You're checking the vast majority of activity related boxes. And it doesn't need to be 5 days of resistance training and a bunch of cardio afterwards. I got to stay on the treadmill afterwards. Each workout's got to be 90 minutes. It does not need to be that. It could be, again, 1 hour of resistance training per week. Honestly, the more we learn about this, like almost every study that's ever been done on like the maintenance volume or minimum effective dose for hypertrophy or muscle growth or strength, like every time we look at this, the bar goes lower. It's like, all of a sudden it's like one
Yeah,
heavy set of each squat, bench, and deadlift like enough to like get
Yeah.
stronger. Like every time we study this, the bar goes lower. So again, that's not attacking the how do I enjoy this stuff, but it certainly is attacking the barrier of entry from the context of I don't have all this time and it's such a big time suck and I got to do this 5 6 7 times a week. You don't and no matter what, you will always get the most from the initial phase of doing something. And so if you're doing nothing, like one lift and one thing that gets your heart rate up, again, gets you the biggest bang for your buck, there's always a diminishing return. So yeah, I try and yes, we can work on trying to connect with the stuff that we really care about. And I think for longevity's sake, that is really important. But to get started, I think it might be really powerful to hear that you don't actually have to do as much as you think.
Yeah. But I will add to that. I would say the issue with that is that people don't set appropriate expectations, right? And that might come hand in hand with the fact that when you first start lifting or get into fitness, you have very unrealistic expectations of what's achievable in a certain time period, right? That's not to discourage people from getting started because, man, if when I started lifting, somebody told me, hey, 15 years down the road, you're going to look like you kind of lift.
Mediocre. No, I'm just kidding. I'm
I
fucking around. Me
would
too.
have, yeah, no, it's
No,
true,
I'm
right?
fucking
It's
around. I'm
true.
fucking
I
around.
would have mediocre relative to like people's
Yeah,
expectations.
for
That's the
sure.
thing, right?
Yeah,
I probably would have never like been as committed as I was at the beginning. My level of commitment at the beginning was because I thought within a year I was going to be freaking jacked, right? And why do I bring this up? Because sometimes people put the minimum effort required to be healthy, to maintain good muscle health, good bone health, feel good, which might be, one or two lifting sessions per week, maybe three lifting sessions with not super high intensity, maybe 30 to 45 minutes on each of those sessions. And that's great, right? But then they're like, man, why don't I look a certain
sure.
way? Or
Yeah,
why is my body composition not improving in the way that I want it to? It's like the amount of, there's massive discrepancy between how much you need to try to just be relatively healthy and be in decent shape to achieve certain physique goals. It's huge, right? Like I would say in that circumstance, training 5 or 6 times a week for an hour to an hour and a half, taking most sets to failure with high volume, feeling super fatigued, like that's what's required, right? I've been doing that for years and I see small amounts of progress. But imagine if we were just lifting 2 or 3 times a week, we could probably do that now and maintain where we're at, but we definitely wouldn't be able to make substantial progress doing that. So I think it's important for people to have congruence between what they're doing and what they actually want to accomplish as well, because that results in so much internal stress. I'm sure you've experienced, Jordan, with clients that are like, I'm doing this, but I want this. And it's like, what you're doing is not going to get you to where you want to.
sure. And I don't know if it's a direct devil's advocate, but what I would say is that there's two ways to go about this. If you're somebody who just heard me lower the barrier of entry and say, wow, cool. Jordan says, I could do 2 days a week and that's going to get me the vast majority of health benefits. Wow, amazing. Hey, I can do one or two 20 to 25 minute, 30-minute all in interval workouts. And man, I can really boost my cardiovascular health. It doesn't take, going on 5 6 runs a week. And for a lot of people, I think that that's very motivating and calming and anxiety quelling.
Totally. Yeah.
But if I were to kind of devil's advocate, or at least propose an alternative route for motivation, I also think human psychology is pretty clear that seeing results begets motivation. And so,
Sure.
I mean, we don't need to look any further than what we see in and again, this is a bit contentious, but the calorie deficit research, where like adherence is better on lower calories. People adhere better to lower calories in the research. And I'm not saying in a real world free living scenario with no guidance, people should just be slashing calories. I'm not saying that. But people who see results end up maybe, again, starting to create that association of the thing they're doing, the result they're getting. You do that for enough weeks and months and years, all of a sudden it becomes, you have an identity shift and this is who you are now. And you become Joey who's, hey, I just go to the gym now because it's who I am. So I think that there's also something to something to the idea of doing a bit more to kind of light that fire and see some results, to be like, oh yeah, like this thing, if you're going from not lifting at all to lifting twice a week for 30 minutes, for the first 6 months to a year, you're going to see results. You're going to feel stronger. You're going to feel better. But pretty quickly, it's going to be about maintaining the muscle that you do have, which, by the way, is what health really is. It's building enough muscle to do all your daily functions, and then maintaining that till you die. And so, yeah, 2 times a week, you could probably accomplish that. But there's also something to be said, like, I don't ever want to poo-poo people who are training more actually than the goal they have. Or like, I just want to be fit, strong, and healthy. I'm like, well, you're training, 5-6 hours a week, because maybe for them in that moment, doing over not overdoing it in general, but overdoing just achieving health is what they need to get really excited about this thing. And I will just say that that's also my own bias, because that's my own arc. I only train less than 90 total minutes a week right now for lifting. And that's because
What? For real?
that's because I spent 10 years lifting for a long time. So I'm certainly
Yeah.
privileged to be having the chat of like, hey, I'm enjoying maintenance now, like cool, like, and I've been doing this for almost 2 years now. So I love the idea of like, hey, right now you're super motivated, you want to see results, and doing a bit more and seeing a bit more results as a way of like rewiring your brain of what this habit does for you. I'm all for that if that clicks for you. And again, not to bring up the calorie thing, but it is, you and I have had clients that have failed in some ways because they've gone too low in calories and felt terrible. And, maybe it wasn't
Hmm.
with us, but, having prior experiences of that. I've also had clients who air quote failed because they, you know, air quote tried to diet on as many calories as possible and ended up like feeling like they were in a deficit, but they're in a 100 calorie deficit that takes months to manifest itself on the scale.
Hmm.
They're
Hmm.
never actually getting a return on investment. I mean, like, humans can rationalize being uncomfortable for a return on
Hmm.
that discomfort. And so I think it's
Sure.
about finding that level of, how much do I need to suck out the motivation from the results versus, how much do I want to just put faith in I can do less and, long term, this is really good for me. So I think there's a bit on both ends of that.
Yeah. Okay. I want to ask you personally about your training now because I train 4 to 5 times a week, still roughly an hour to an hour and 15 for each of those sessions. And partially it's because I really do love training. I also really love food. So if I like lift more, I can eat more food. Uh, dude, I sit on this desk at least 8 hours a day, right? So I'm pretty sedentary outside of my lifting, and I go for a walk first thing in the morning most days if I can. And then at the end of the day, maybe I go for another 30-minute walk, but I'm pretty sedentary. Now, part of me is also that consistent with training because I feel, and this is not good, and it goes to show that even people who have been doing this for a while still have like negative psychology around these things. If I spend like a day or two without going to the gym, I feel like, and I know it's so unreasonable to even think this, but I feel like I've lost all my muscle. I feel like I'm weak. I feel like I'm out of shape. And so I partially stay that consistent with training because of the fear of losing what I have, right? And I'm saying this because I want to ask you in the past 2 years where you've significantly decreased your training, what have you experienced? And have you experienced still small gains in certain areas and improvements in strength?
Yeah. I mean, I'll be totally honest with you. I lost muscle. So I went from lifting at my peak, similar 5 by 90, 5 times a week, 90 minutes, three 90-minute upper body sessions, maybe two 90-minute lower body sessions.
Sure.
Um, biggest I ever was. Um, and now I'm at one total 90 minutes, right? So one fifth, exactly one fifth of the time
Hmm.
allocation, which we can use as a proxy for volume and all that. And I probably train similarly hard with similarly decent programming and all of that stuff. So variables mostly stable outside of time. And I lost muscle totally. But what's interesting is I think of it in the sense of, so what's interesting is for a guy like you and me, as you train, the amount of volume that you can do doesn't go up linearly. In fact, it probably goes up in the early part of training and then it probably either flatlines or goes down as you become more advanced. But what does happen is your minimum effective dose for hypertrophy probably goes up almost linearly across your training career.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
the difference between somebody's minimum effective dose of to grow. So let's use the term minimum effective volume. The difference between their minimum effective volume and what they could do to maintain grows almost larger and larger over the training career. The minimum maintenance volume will go up too, but minimum effective dose will go up higher. So you might be training 4 or 5 times a week, and I'm not trying to convince you of anything here, but you might be training 4 or 5 times a week for like 100 grams of muscle per year, where like you might be able to do a third of
Sure.
that and not grow at all. And you might be like, oh, well, that's an interesting decision to make here because it's
Yeah.
not that the more you train, the more you need to train to grow maximally, but it is the case that the bigger you are, probably the more you have to do to grow at all. Um,
Sure.
and so I lost muscle, but The truth is any calorie or any calorie number you eat eventually becomes your maintenance, right? Your body will adapt to those calorie needs, and then you'll maintain there by either having gained weight or lost weight, and metabolic adaptation and all that. And I think of it similarly here, where like I dropped really low in volume and I lost some muscle and then maintained. It's like my body found out, okay, this was below your maintenance volume when you were that big. You lost a little muscle. It's enough to maintain that muscle. So I lost a little bit of muscle, but frankly, I kept pretty in the first year, I kept tabs on what was happening muscle wise. I would take photos just to see. It was an experiment. And I didn't think I was losing muscle. It took a couple of years for that to manifest visually. But after about 18 months of doing it, I started to feel like things were leveling out. And I was like, this is firmly my maintenance volume now. And not that, how dare you not be 100% following every single thing I do with my training, but I have asthma. I have terrible cardiovascular fitness. I played sports my whole life and relied on skill and like athleticism, and was always the least fit person on every team I ever played for in my entire life. And I was, the more I think about just cardiovascular fitness and health, I was like, dude, I'm already beyond what the muscularity I would need for health. I already have a beautiful wife and children. I don't need to like try and appeal to the opposite sex. Yes, I am a fitness professional, and there's some level of, hey, dude, like at least have some muscle if you're going to talk a lot about
Walking the
building
walk.
muscle,
Yeah.
right? At some level. But I really wanted to get my cardiovascular fitness up. And so I
Yeah.
shifted just my time allocation away from lifting to some degree, just to make time for,
Yeah.
in this case, running. So yeah, truth be told, I lost muscle. And if I were to go back and say, well, I don't want to lose any muscle, I probably would have bumped it to like 120 minutes a week, maybe two workouts a week for an hour, or 4 workouts for a half hour. And I think I would have maintained a higher percentage, probably lost a little bit. I'm never someone
Yeah.
who's so bullish on you'll maintain every single iota of muscle,
Sure.
but somewhere between 1/3 and 1/9 your current volume probably maintains somewhere between 90 and 100% of the muscle mass you currently have. And I was a guinea pig for that for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, because I would say an 80% reduction is pretty aggressive, right?
Yeah.
Like, what if you went from 5 sessions to just 2 sessions, still 90 minutes? My perspective is like, I wonder how little you can do to still make a little bit of progress. And this whole conversation of volume and minimum effective volume and all this is so finicky because it's influenced by so many variables, right? In the sense that like if you're training intensity and uh, even just like if you start training a little bit more optimally, the amount of volume you might be able to handle is less, right? Even though on paper you should be able to handle more volume or whatnot. To put into perspective, when I was probably 19, 20 years old, I was really getting into powerlifting. And my leg day was a 5x5 squat followed by a 5x5 deadlift and then some hack squat and some like hamstring curls. I would spend 2 hours in the gym
Crazy.
and I felt like that was low volume training
Yeah.
because I was like, oh, 5x5 squat, that's not high volume.
Sure.
I don't know how I used to do that because now if I do like 1 or 2 really hard sets of squats, I'm gassed. Actually, if I do one hard set of squats, my second set, like the performance is substantially lower. And I don't know if it's because I've been getting older, even though 30 is not old at all. Part of it is also just changes in lifestyle, right? Like our bodies have a certain ability to handle a certain amount of stress, and work and family, I wouldn't say are super stressful, but they add stress to life, right? You have responsibilities. I wake up 3 times a night because our son still doesn't sleep throughout the night. So it's like in some instances, I feel like almost reducing the volume allows you to push the intensity a little bit higher, perform a little bit better, progress a little bit faster. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Um, I have a friend who I've had on my podcast, and I don't particularly agree with his perspective when it comes to training. By the way, this person is highly educated. They have their PhD in exercise physiology. Uh, they're not a professional bodybuilder because they haven't competed, but they look like a professional bodybuilder. They have been training clients for over a decade, and he is the biggest proponent of low volume training. And low volume to the sense of like you would say that's definitely way too low. Right? Like he trains his quads, for example, once a week with like 2 sets, and he's like, I cannot handle more volume than that. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. And his whole perspective is train sufficiently to stimulate adaptation and then allow for maximal recovery. right? And he's noticed when he trains with lower volume, he actually gets stronger at a slightly faster rate. And he keeps tabs of all his training. And the people that he's been training have been seeing better strength gains with lower volume as well. And then my whole perspective is like, how much of that is an acute benefit of dropping fatigue versus a chronic benefit of actually training with lower volume? There's so much there, right? But like, it's hard to argue against somebody saying, hey, I train less and I'm getting stronger faster, and saying like, no, that's actually not optimal. You should do twice the amount of volume because the research says blah, 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 right? So I know we're going in a million different
No,
directions
I
here, but
think
I've
I think
always
that
found
that's
that conversation really interesting.
totally. I think that it's a pretty. I would answer it almost in a simple way of the way to parse that out is just to extend the lifespan of the time frame you're looking at. And so if you're,
Yeah,
I have people that are like, oh, I'm training less than ever and I'm getting stronger faster than ever. It's like, yeah, that totally. If in 6, 10, 12 weeks, you will do that.
sure.
Absolutely. It's called a taper. It's like what a powerlifter would taper. It's like a marathoner would taper. It's like, wow, I'm training less and I'm
Yeah,
performing better. It's like for now, and so if you're like, I would pick a, again, it's rare that people need to be doing sorts of these experiments, but like if you wanted to see if low volume training was good for you, do it for a year and see if it'll just allow for that acute washout to happen where it's like, okay, the drop in fatigue has happened. Now I am strictly getting stronger at the rate that I'm, gaining muscle. And so when you look at that over a year, you can kind of wash out that acute drop in fatigue that obviously will happen when you come from
yeah.
a higher volume training.
Man, yes, for sure. I think there's so much inter-individual difference too in terms of how people actually respond to training, right? Have you ever seen, I'm sure you have, when you look at research studies on hypertrophy responses to different training protocols. And it's like, hey, on average, these people who did a little bit more volume grew a little bit more muscle. But then if you look at the individual responses, there are people that lost muscle on higher volume. There are people that saw no progress. And it's like the hypertrophy stuff I think is really difficult to generalize because there does seem to be so much like individual difference in terms of how people respond to different training protocols.
Yeah, yeah. Can I listen, dear listener, we've transcended into some hypertrophy chat.
We can go back to
Well, I'm going to
general
show I
health
want to just
stuff.
no, it's all good. It's good. We're almost up on the hour. But I want to this is the proximity to failure research. I want to get the volume um meta-analysis that just came up. If you look at that
I was
volume,
going to bring this up. I think it's ridiculous, man.
well, if you look at that recent volume meta-analysis, this is training to failure. Where's the volume one? If you look at it, and I'm trying to pull up the come on guys, come on, it's Robinson, it's Robinson, Pelland, same dudes. Can we is it a preprint? Maybe because it's a preprint. Anyway, if you look at the graph, right, and they draw a line of best fit, they draw a trend line, and it's showing a dose response relationship. You do more volume, make more gains. But if you actually look at the dots plotted on that graph, it's crazy. I mean, there's so many people, so many studies where the people are growing unbelievably well with lower volume. So, like, yeah, the trend line looks like what it is, but I always look at, and I wish I could pull it up right now. I just don't have it in front of me. But there's like this on the entire graph. There's just like so many dots of people crushing it with less volume. And if you go into these studies, of course, what it's funny that these exact guys are the people that I learned this from. If you go into these studies, of course, what's being reported is average, right? Because we just that's the best way to communicate things, so we can give population level pieces of advice, even though not all of us are average. Most of us are not falling directly on the average of a bell curve here. But if you look at the heterogeneity or just the difference from individual to individual within a study, so it's like, hey, we take this intervention,
Mhm.
we take 100 people, they all train fucking 10 sets a week for 8 weeks. They grew this much. It's like if you actually look at all those 100 people and how they grew, it's
Yeah,
crazy the difference in what people respond to. I don't want
yeah,
that to be scary to the listener of like, well, how am I ever going to know if that's me? I got to try a whole bunch of different things. The truth is, you probably don't need to. I mean, you could try lower volume, you could try higher volume, you could do that. But I think, gosh, as much as there's two people sitting here who both sell resistance training programs. I've never seen what your programming looks like, but what I will bet is that it's going to be within the ballpark from a structure perspective, each individual variable, the volume, the set number, the exercise selection, the rest periods, it's all going to be good enough to grow muscle. You don't need to sweat if your program is a little bit more volume or a little less volume. Like, most people are creating intelligent programs that have enough stimulus in them. And so you could try some that are a little higher and lower, totally, but I would, it's not like you're going to do Joey's program and grow, and my program and not grow, and such program and grow really well, and then this one you're going to lose muscle. It's like, most people writing programs are writing them with enough stimulus for you to make progress. Don't want people sweating that's the reason why. But yeah, I always crack up when I look at that graph. By the way, I love that meta-analysis. Just like I appreciate it. I'm not poo-pooing it at all. But yeah, it certainly is interesting, the individual different responses to certain volumes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, yeah, the high volume stuff, I don't know about your perspective, Jordan. I think it's getting a little out of hand personally, in the sense of like, dude, if I do 6 to 8 hard sets for one muscle in one session, I'm gassed. Like, I can't really do much more high quality work. I wouldn't be able to do 50 sets for a muscle in a week. Just like, absolutely impossible. But I know how I would feel, right? And it's crazy to think that there have been studies where they do that amount of volume for a certain number of weeks and people see substantially more growth than like half the volume.
Yeah.
And then again, it's
go
like,
ahead.
dude, how long does that take to, you're in the gym probably for like 3 hours if you're training with appropriate intensity and rest periods and all of that stuff.
I'm going to screen share, and I know maybe I'll put this on YouTube because I rarely screen share, but here's that graph, right? So here's with fractional weekly sets, right? And so what I crack up with is like, look at this graph. So the graph is drawn, and I'll describe it. Basically, on the y-axis is how much people grew, and on the x-axis is the amount of sets that they did. And basically, it's showing that the more sets you do, the more you grow. But dude, like, these people all right here are growing crazy well with low volume. And there's so many dots here of people growing insanely well. Like, okay, there's this dot, right? Yeah. This guy's growing really well, but like, then there's this guy who's doing 35 sets per week. And, all of these people are growing better with a third. So
I was gonna say, the interesting part is the highest rates of growth are with that 10 to 15 set per week.
Right here. I also think that again, nothing is wrong with the research itself. There's only wrong with the application and takeaways. So sometimes there's things wrong with the research, but I think these guys did a great job. I think they did so many good things. But one of the other take homes for me is that once you're outside, and Coach Kassem did an amazing post on this, like, once you're, let's say, over about 18 sets per muscle group per week, it's time prohibitive. Sure. You don't have time to do 18 sets per muscle group for all muscle groups in a given week. It's like, again, it's like 5 or 6 workouts, 90 minutes to do something like that. And so when we look at the studies that say, oh, you can grow 52 sets of quads or 41 sets of this, that's not a thing of, oh, I should train each muscle group with that amount. It might have application for specialization cycles of like, it seems like if I really want to grow my delts, I can probably handle more than I thought they could, provided I make room for that volume in my weekly allocation for training. If you're looking to grow everything at once, which is what most people should be focused on, you're not a pro bodybuilder. You don't need to bring up your upper outer glutes. You need to get strong everywhere. You're probably time limited to training with between 6 and 12 sets per muscle group per week. So all of this, again, I love the research, super cool. If you want to grow a muscle group, in my group program, if you just do it as it's written, we're at like, anywhere from like 8 to 15 sets of glutes. But if we have some optional work, and it's like, hey, there's like 2 optional glute exercises that could take you to, close to 20 sets per glutes per week. But like, most people are like, Jordan, I could never survive that. They're like, my glutes are torched. So anyway, obviously I'll post this, and I'll probably put this one on YouTube just because I hate putting a visual and then not doing that. But yeah, I look at this study and I think that line be damned. I'm living right here, my man. I'm living right here. There's so many people killing it. And I bet you could say more dots would enter this box if you improve training quality, if you improved exercise selection, if you had a coach. Like, all of those things increase the probability of getting yourself into, being able to do more and being able to do less and see more.
Yeah. Jordan, how many times have you experienced this where you work with a client and they're relatively newer to training, they're doing their workouts, you're giving them feedback, slowly improving intensity and technique, And all of a sudden, the same program, they're like, man, this is really hard. I can't recover from this.
Yeah,
Right. And
all
you
the
actually
time.
have a decrease in volume for that reason. I've experienced that so many times where even clients who have been experienced lifters in the sense that they've been working out for years, uh, you start giving feedback on videos and you're like, listen, you can improve the range of motion here a little bit. Hey, spend another fraction of a second pausing in this stretched position. Hey, you probably had another rep left in here and you improve those things. And all of a sudden they're like, man, those 6 sets of quads now feel like 12 or 15, right? In terms of like how fatiguing they actually are.
Yep.
So yeah, I appreciate you bringing up the variable of training quality because it's something that's very difficult to equate for because it's such a subjective variable,
Yep.
right? Like how do you report training quality in a research study? Pretty difficult. And a lot of obviously uh, a lot of these researchers know about proper technique, are pushing the intensity, but full range of motion for somebody is different than full range of motion for somebody else. A good rep in terms of tempo is different than for somebody else, right? I remember, I forgot where it was, but I was talking to some researchers about a training study they were designing, and they were doing what they called myo reps, where you have slow rest and then just do a couple more reps. And the way they were doing it is they were working up to a like 10 rep max or 15 rep max and something like a leg press. And then they would do that first set to failure, and then they would rest 30 seconds and do like myo reps essentially until they couldn't do a set of like 5 or something like that, right? And there were some people that would reach that failure point after like 3 myo sets or myo reps, or is the correct term myo reps? I don't know why it's called myo
I
reps
know.
when they're technically
It's
drop down sets.
yeah, no,
I've always been confused about terminology there.
myo rep sets, I guess,
Myo
is the
rep sets, yep.
mouthful. Yeah.
And then they told me that there were some people where like you literally had to stop them because they never got to that point where they couldn't do less than 5. And that tells me one of two things. Either that person recovers insanely quickly, which I don't think is the case. I think what's more likely the case is that the way they're performing the exercise isn't as locally fatiguing, right? Because you and I both know that you could do 10 reps to failure on a leg press with a relatively fast tempo and bounce off the bottom and not be that fatigued. Whereas you could do a 10 RM with a super slow eccentric, pausing in the bottom stretch position, going really deep. And it's a world of a difference in terms of how it feels. Dude, I can milk the same sort of fatigue on a leg press with 5 plates versus 2 plates, right? Simply by changing my foot position, changing the depth, changing the tempo. And those variables are really difficult to equate for in research.
Yep. Yep. I appreciate that the lengthened partial research from Wolf and Jeff Nippard that they released all of the training videos. I think that transparency was amazing, but it also shot them in the foot because I think it exposed a lot of potential muddying of the results a little bit. I think just like watching people watching 15 different people do a Bayesian curl that like when you just read it in a study that you're assuming is standardized, and then you watch the people do it and you're like, this is 15 different techniques, there's 15 different techniques here, and they were doing like, a curl. Yeah, I don't even want to go too deep in that, but they were doing curls and like some people were doing them against the wall and they like weren't even straightening out the elbow all the way. And so that was supposed to be the full range of motion group, but then the partial range of motion group stopped like 13 degrees sooner. And it was just like, well, technique is going to really differ from person to person. I mean, it shouldn't on some things, but yeah, definitely happens.
Well, research should be transparent like that, right? And it should expose holes so we can continue to see new things.
Yep.
And anatomy plays a huge role in terms of how people perform exercises too, and how fatiguing and locally fatiguing they are in particular muscles.
Yep.
Anyways, man, I know we're hitting the hour mark.
Cool, man. Hey, I got to head back dad duty. I'm sure you got similar things to do. I appreciate your time, Joe. Always fun to come on and chat.
Yeah,
Thanks.
brother.
Appreciate it, man.
Thank you, man. Appreciate you. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Where Optimal Meets Practical. If you liked the episode, it would mean the world to me if you posted a screenshot to your social media or left a 5-star review on iTunes. That stuff really helps. If you ever want to get in touch with me, just shoot me a DM on Instagram @JordanLipsFitness. I'm always around to chat. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.